technology could be used in a very unique way to solve healthcare problems.
Just because you have the tech doesn't mean that it's time to use it.
There were 6 billion fines given out from the FDA.
Do they know the rules?
Like a password sticker on your computer. Why would you do that?
All of those feel trivially solvable. What's the grander thing that's hard about this?
You're going to get shut down.
You have to always sell the story of like, what's the problem? How does it make money? And how does this like grow massively?
Lauren, I'll let you mostly introduce yourself, but I'll say the thing I'm most excited about that I hope you expand upon a little bit. You're an engineer turned VC. We have more technically minded and less technically minded VCs who get on the stage, but I think you're going to be the first engineer turned venture capitalist. Whether or not we have technical concepts today, we'll see, but that's less important than just the ability to understand and kind of grok it from a not vetting it live in a pitch, but understanding what questions to ask or how it influences, kind of VCdom generally. So I have a question related to that. But first, Why don't you, for the crowd, just introduce yourself broadly?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren. I'm an investor at MGV. We invest $250K checks into pre-seed and seed stage software companies. But before getting into venture, as mentioned, I was a software engineer. So originally I studied computer science engineering at the University of Michigan. For any Wolverines out there, go blue. But for me, I just always loved tech. I think solving problems, building something, creating solutions was just always super exciting to me and was just the main driver of my career. I just kind of noticed my excitement about just wanting to get closer and closer to the idea and really just jam with founders. And that's what drew me into venture, was saying hey, I love being kind of that thought partner for founders or folks who are trying to build something new. And how can I continue to do that? I love early stage ideas. I really like the landscape of innovation. And that's kind of what drove me to venture.
I'm excited for you to have that, bring that context and the right way of thinking to the founders today. Founders in the crowd, I'm sure you're excited too. I think we should get this show on the road. So everyone, let's give a round of applause and welcome founder number 1 to stage. What's your name?
Nidhi.
Say it again.
Nidhi.
Nidhi? You're going to have a minute to tell us what you're building, get some feedback, Nidhi. Are you ready?
Yes.
What are you building?
Healthcare in today's world is broken. If you or I need healthcare, we go to a GP appointment or get a specialist appointment. And once that consultation ends, the care ends right then and there. In today's world, that doesn't work. It's probably okay for the last century. And in today's world, most of us live with chronic conditions that need continuous daily care in our own daily life. And that's exactly what I'm building. A personalized health companion for chronic conditions that's going to help people manage their medical conditions in their daily lives while tracking their health, guiding them to better health, and reducing complications and in turn reducing the burden on the traditional archaic healthcare systems that exist all around the world. And I'm an MD by background, a health coach, and a patient trying to access healthcare on the other side as well. So talk about being a domain expert. And I'm launching this month in the States, UK, and globally. And I'm actually from the UK, so just visiting. And that's my pitch.
Good job. Super credentialed pitch. What did you think?
I mean, okay, I'm love healthcare. I think it's incredibly broken. So appreciate your passion in the space. I guess my first question is you talk about for folks who have chronic conditions and that management. Chronic conditions have been around for some time. Curious to know why now? Why is what's pressing for this solution today?
So chronic conditions are a lot more in today's world. For example, in the last century, people were falling ill due to injuries they got during wars or acute infections where they go to a hospital, get antibiotics or surgeries, get the treatment that they need and leave without needing the care anymore. In today's world, it's shifted completely, if not 100%, maybe 95% of conditions needing that chronic care, whether it be as mild as having a migraine or an IBS or diabetes or heart disease or people who had a stroke. Every single condition needs that chronic care. And why now? It's because we have the technology, we have the resources. It's just not been put together because everybody considers healthcare very regulated for good reason. like industry, but not at the cost of lives. People are dying without innovation being fast enough.
That feels interesting to me, but one of the reasons I'm struggling to know the literal consequences is we haven't gotten to the touch and feel yet in the user experience. Like, what is the product literally?
Think of it as the intelligence, combining the intelligence of a doctor, nutritionist, nurse, and a bunch of other allied health professionals. The intelligence of all of them combined into one personal health companion that does the guidance and gives you the guidance, whether it be...
So when you say companion, this is an app or...
Yeah, it's a app, an AI companion that tracks your health through various metrics, through wearables and everything, and then it gives you proactive guidances, whether it be medication reminders or tracking your blood glucose levels and then giving you that, okay, it's time for your GP appointment notification.
So it's kind of a generalist companion. I guess I say that because there are a lot of startups that'll be like, we're going to track your heart rate or your stress levels, or we're going to be specifically for chronic conditions, and this will be your diary for your chronic condition change over time. But in your case, it sounds it's a generalist companion, as in it's going to be more broad based.
I would say it's one body and everything's related, so it needs to be combined.
I mean, I kind of am leaning there. Like, a couple of things crossed my mind. One, the first question that I ask myself is like, what's the end product? Like, what's the end goal for having this companion? Like, I definitely think that chronic care for sure is an issue, but, if you're going to have an application or solution for it, like, what is the specific like problem and solution that you're trying to solve with a companion? Is it like, hey, we're seeing our doctor very regularly and like there's just a communication layer that's missing, and so like the end goal is to like have that communication layer with the doctor? Or is it something else? That's like probably like one of my first questions. The second question I have, this is very broad, and like the body is incredibly complex. I spent some time last year like really digging into migraines, for example. And so I know that there's apps specific just to tracking headaches and migraine care. And so I think the challenge of, hey, I'm doing this generalist like AI companion is, there's already, I think like apps that are designed for specific body parts or specific types of monitoring. Having a really targeted goal, if you're going to try to do something like this, I think could help like, direct you a little bit, just to give you a bit clearer of a path. That's like my next kind of like point of view as far as like what are you trying to focus on with your companion? Because if not, something like this, in my mind, honestly, could feel like it could be commoditized.
Yeah, I think those are very valid points. The first question was, what's the end goal? The end goal is to be that third space healthcare, virtual healthcare system that people can access wherever they are outside of the physical
Can I
setting
pause you
of
for a second?
hospital.
You said you're a physician by background, right? First of all, my mother, sister, a lot of my family physicians by background, so I have a lot of love for physicians and what they do, and your job is much harder than everyone in the venture and tech ecosystem, so it's much respect to you on this stage. Much more important and much harder. Have you been in tech until now?
I feel like I've been in tech all my life. My mom's like a big shot in tech industry, and then yeah.
So one of the things about the translation here that like I think healthcare folks take differently than tech folks is and this is where I think some of this is coming from, is the specificity isn't because there isn't this overall grander goal. For example, you're mentioning like this companion or this third place to go to for any condition, which can be part of someone's longer term, what they expect the impact to be. But I think in the shorter term, the challenge becomes, it's actually a very literal question when we ask it from the investor standpoint, which is like, and even if I asked you founder to founder, it also be very practical and tactical of like, okay, I get it on that long term, but today, how are you going to achieve that? As an example, when you say when I ask the question, is it chronic or this or that, and Lauren mentions like a migraine specific app. Part of the reason I'm asking isn't necessarily because I don't think an app should one day handle all of those things, but today, if you were going to do something generalist, my head goes, okay, are you just going to do like a foundational model call to the latest model out of OpenAI because you need to like figure out which condition first? Does your backend need to be way more complex? Like one of the easy things for the migraine app is probably they can do a fine-tuned small model on a bunch of migraine data. If you're going to be a generalist health app that's also going to serve my migraines and my other things, you might be able to do it. And again, that might be the product approach. But it's almost a question that, again, like I often remind people, questions aren't necessarily what they seem. It's an underneath question of how are you going to get V1 done and what does it look like over time?
Yes, I definitely feel the conversation got derailed into thinking that the app is going to be a generalist health app. It's not going to be a generalist. I'm actually launching the first version. It's going to be very medical condition specific. So very specialized for each medical condition and starting off with type 2 diabetes.
Okay.
And then in the setting of a patient who's had a stroke. So very specific and niche needs of people with these
super interesting. So it's almost like the like tailwind of an experience is what you're targeting, is like their need. This is almost like I think about it, a patient needs a companion or guidance of a kind is what you're targeting. It sounds like with the first two examples you gave of like post-diabetes diagnosis or condition or post-stroke, there's like follow-up that needs to be, not literal follow-up, but the person needs to be compliant or tracked.
Everything that they need to manage and achieve remission.
My question now, and it might not have been like super clear, is how is this done currently?
Through manual dietitian appointments, through 5 minutes of guidance from a doctor before a patient is being discharged, in the hopes of the patient following that advice and not getting a repeat stroke. It's really archaic and really not followed. And I'm not just a physician by background. This is my second startup, and I work in neurology. So we're very much close to AI, much probably more than engineers learning what AI is.
Sure.
And that's why I feel like technology could be used in a very unique way to solve healthcare problems from the care itself, and not just innovating the outside things of healthcare, like healthcare admin or note taking and stuff.
One of the things that is striking me, and again, this is where I think like I think you are going to need to iterate your pitch, but when you do, it's going to be very easy for you to get to these other higher levels because as you reveal stuff, I get more interested. I don't. That's usually true, but like particularly in this case is what I mean. And the reason is when it became clear to me that it's like, hey, today, think about a patient with a stroke. For the rest of their life, they have things they need to be watching out for the 6 to 12 months afterwards, things they need to be compliant for. And currently it's manual appointments. Currently it's their spouse reminding them. Currently it's them forgetting and going into consequence because they didn't take their pills or their supplements the right way, or they weren't doing a checkup and they started a new exercise routine, which caused this other condition that actually gave them the second stroke. I'm making stuff up in some sense here, but I really believe in this concept you're talking about for today. It's done roughly. There's no compliance that requires humans. We instead believe an AI-driven companion on these, especially where a patient knows there's some value to their compliance. They struggle with it today, and we can make it easy. We can make it automated. We can make it cheap. It's good for the doctor. It's good for the patient. It's good for the family. I love that. That's the story that you need to get to, even when you're giving that grander vision. Because, again, as you revealed stuff, I got very specific in imagining what does the world look like when, what's the name of the company again?
Yantir.
Yantir? What does it look like when Yantir is at scale, right? When everyone's using it. And at first it was hard. You had the grand vision of when everyone's using it, everyone's healthy, versus when everyone's using it. And that might be true one day. One day it might be literally the health for everything app. But today it's when everyone's using it, they're taking their health actions after whatever event or whatever condition that allows them to continue to be or remain healthy. And I think that's really compelling.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think I love the fact that you have a really big vision, because I think that shows that you're thinking long term and you're like committed to, hey, I want to build this out and I see a future for this, and it's not just a small solution. But I do think that, don't stray away from starting off niche and like leaning into it, right? Like honestly, it shows like, hey, if I can capture this market, if I can build a product that like fits within this category and then replicate it and do it over and over again, like that's amazing, right? But one, starting off and just explaining the concreteness, I think helps investors really like understand truly like, hey, this is what's happening. Like this workflow doesn't make sense. 100% agree. Like management of chronic care is challenging, right? And like there isn't a really good flow or just like infrastructure to support that. But then from there, hey, how much money is lost? Or like how much time? Or, just like what are some of the more metric or measurable driven kind of consequences of doing this, of like how this current state of it, I think like adds into that. And then saying like, well, why now? Never before have we had this technology that like allows us to do this. Or I'm seeing physicians like actively looking for solutions to do this. Or, now more than ever, people are embracing telehealth and, interacting with healthcare digitally, like, and that continues to grow, like, showing more than it's funny. I'm thinking about a conversation I had with an investor recently where it's just like, well, we've got the tech now. And I jokingly said back to her, I was like, well, we have roller skates and we have rollerblades, but you see me like skating around New York City all the time. Like, just because you have the tech doesn't mean that it's time to use it, or you know what I mean? And so it's just like outside of that, like what signals are you getting from the market that's showing like, hey, like we're ready for this?
Just one final point. We'll have to end for time, but I find this so compelling. One of the examples in your case, what Lauren's talking about, when you talk about like technologies here, one of the stories I think that would be compelling for you to tell, again, I'm going to make some of this up, is like, it's not that we didn't have the ability to have a companion app before, but the companion app would require a user and a doctor to be manually inputting this sort of information in a hard-to-do way where it doesn't get adaptive. For it to be adaptive would have required an engineering team to like manually tag every single behavior someone takes across a medical database and raise risk factors, versus generalized models understand case studies and patient histories and have all this data. And so for the first time, to build something that you give to a user that they don't need to like normalize the input themselves. They can just say, here's what happened yesterday. And that can be understood and actioned upon by the app, I think is so, again, compelling, and to this point of like, there's a moment in time for you. And again, I'm partial to you because I believe in a lot of what physicians do. It's the complicating factors of what being a healthcare professional provides can now be automated for the first time. And there's consequences that we should watch out for, but there's consequences to take advantage of. But for the sake of time, we got to move on. Thank you so much for sharing. Really appreciate it. Before we move to the next pitch, I do want to ask a question, Lauren, from this perspective of AI, is often going to be used right now by founders as it's a good time or we have the technology. And I think, your feedback there is fantastic of giving people a sense of, okay, what does that mean? We have a lot of things. How do you think, though, about how much you need to hear the use case of AI in that moment versus the outcome? I actually find myself often not literally disagreeing with someone on stage, but they'll be talking to a founder and they'll talk a lot more about the outcome, where it's like, okay, what does AI enable? Whereas I go, I care about that, but as an investor, I also care about how defensible is this? How much do I think your team is going to need to, be a certain type of team to achieve it? Do you need to understand these models foundationally, or are you building a wrapper? How much do you want to hear in an early pitch? What are you evaluating in, a first meeting, a first 20-minute, 30-minute meeting on a founder to know what sort of AI company they are?
I think at the end of the day, I go back to is this a problem? And like, is this a real valid problem? And is this like the proper solution and the approach to take to solve it? I do think AI is an amazing technology, but also how people leverage it and like, use it for what it's good for, I think is really important. So, for example, AI is really great at pattern matching. Like, if this is an example where it's like, we need a lot of help matching patterns, then like, amazing. If it's, hey, we need more assistance analyzing data, like AI is fantastic at that. So I think part of when I'm hearing the word AI, I just think about, well, is this technology being leveraged in a way where your solution to the hopefully real problem makes sense. And then like for as far as like use cases versus outcomes, I think that's like a hard one for me to answer, mostly because to be honest, I'm like, well, isn't an outcome like, can it be kind of, can you switch both, and, can you say use case and outcome? Like, aren't they interchangeable? But for me, I just go back to the fundamentals of like what problem is being solved, what solution are you proposing, and, how does AI help you get there faster? Obviously, the team makes a lot of sense. I think we're in this era right now where having the spiky founders or like having the subject matter expert founders is really helpful when you're building an AI-based solution or like AI-powered solution rather, because like, you'll know the market the best. So the problem more concretely. You understand maybe the personas of the potential users or the folks that you're going to be selling it to. So having experts work with someone who might have experience building models is great. And I think like, really leaning into, hey, I'm a team. I know this unique market well, or I know my market well because I might have worked in it, or I might have, dealt with the system myself, et cetera, is kind of what I care about a little bit more.
And I love the subject matter expert who also can figure out what from a model is or isn't right. And you hear this all the time of like people tend to think or realize the edges of AI when they're talking to about something they're an expert in, because then you're like, oh, at the edge of an AI's knowledge is the nuance. And again, I use it every day. I'm pro everybody adopting it, but I think that's the other thing, that a startup with an expert at its helm. If you take a healthcare startup that has subject matter expert physicians using AI or being part of that founding team versus just a disruptive team using AI, the challenge for that second team is going to be, do they know what the thing doesn't know? And the thing can be both AI itself, but also how they attempt to use it in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. With that, shall we welcome founder number 2 to stage?
Yeah, let's do it.
Round of applause for founder number 2. How you doing? What's your name?
Good, how are you? My name is Zephaniah Oditika.
Say it again.
Zephaniah Oditika.
Zephaniah?
Zephaniah.
You're going to have a minute to pitch and then get feedback. Zephaniah, are you ready?
I'm ready.
What are you building?
So we at Global Key Solutions Corporation are building, not AI, we're building data sets around pharmaceutical companies. So what we do is we aggregate FDA data, compliance data for pharmaceutical companies and life science companies, especially around the
You got this.
pharmaceutical companies. I'm listening in there. So the issue is that the Food Drug Administration, FDA, they give out citations and fines, especially to companies and pharmaceutical companies, because we use drugs every day. And as a result, in 2023, there were 6 billion fines given out from the FDA. And as a result, these fines have come from 11,000 citations. And because of this, there's a big industry of compliance data. So we at Global Key Solutions have
That's a minute.
aggregated.
Don't worry.
Okay.
No
worries.
All right. I know you're nervous up here. Don't worry about it. Finish that thought of, so let me tell you where I'm tracking so far. And then, we've got, there are a lot of fines that are coming out of the FDA. It sounds like a lot of compliance data that you're saying comes out of the citations themselves and maybe the back and forths about them. Say a little bit more about what you're doing.
Definitely. So what I was trying to say before I was getting a little nervous was the FDA, they do uninspected audits and audits in general. And the issue is you don't really know who's going to come to your firm. And so what happens is you're scrambling within 2 hours of them telling you who's coming to your firm. And so as a result, you kind of are like, okay, I don't know who's going to come. But then within 2 hours, they tell you, John Smith is going to come. So now you have 2 hours to prepare for John Smith. However, out there, the FDA does publish data, but it's not clean data. So you're not going to find everything from John Smith because...
And sorry, just to clarify, data in this case means what? It's like what John Smith cares about, or?
So essentially with the audits, so FDA documents, essentially, there's Form 483s, there's warning letters, there's all other document classes, and these document classes are different. Some of them can range from you're going to get shut down. Some of them can say there's dust on the floor, make sure to clean it up. So it depends on the severity of what the issue is. And so sometimes what the FDA will do, well, actually a lot of times what the FDA will do is they'll cite you. And when they cite you, they will put the person who came to your facility and their boss. But as a result, on the FDA site, you there's no way to search by the person who's coming to your site. What we've done is we've taken all the data and we've made it palatable to where individuals can see who's coming to their site, what the person has cited for, all these CFR codes, which are Code of Federal Regulations. And we also do FOIA requests, which is Freedom of Information Act of 1996, I believe. And that essentially is just a way to where I can request data. So if a company, a lot of times what like a Sanofi or something like that, what they'll do is they'll say, hey, I know Pfizer got inspected. I want to know what happened in that inspection, but I don't want Pfizer to know
that they made the inquiry.
So we would do it on their behalf. So essentially that's how we would do it.
Really dumb question. Do these places usually operate non-compliantly?
No. So that's the thing. Every facility is different. There could be a facility in New York, a facility in Jersey. They're maybe under the same corporation, but they're two different entities. So essentially, if the New York facility gets audited and they get cited for something, the New Jersey may not. So
let me ask this question slightly differently. I think this is what she really means. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
As you're going, I'm wondering, and it's because of the perspective you're talking from. We can fix that later too.
Mm-hmm.
Is like, are all these people intentionally non-compliant all the time? Like, again, I think we're in the middle of the story.
Yeah.
Okay, so no, they're not. It's not on purpose. Sometimes it can seem like they're on purpose. Like, why would you do that? That's like a password sticker on your computer. Don't do that. But sometimes people do that. It's not like it's on purpose. Well, they don't. It's not like they want to do it. They don't do it on purpose to get cited. It's just maybe a convenience thing.
No, and then like, do they also? Probably a really dumb question. Do they know the rules?
Yeah, so I mean, most of them do know the rules. Is sometimes just you do so many things, and some things just kind of slip through the cracks.
That's the sub question here.
Yeah,
if they do know the rules, or the rules could be known, as in the rules are listed somewhere, why is your startup not based off of, it could be the same workflow, I don't know.
Yeah,
but off of the rules versus what it sounds like you're doing is you're finding histories. So
Mm-hmm.
you're saying histories are valuable. We allow you to use histories for some effect.
Yeah.
If the rules also existed, why not use the rules? So why histories instead of rules?
So because sometimes everyone's inspection is different. Like
the person.
Because the person is not.
This is where I think you anchored too much of, and this is your startup.
Yeah.
So this is not surprising for a
Yeah.
founder to like be way too in the weeds of like, you're talking so much about the person matters here. And I think Lauren and I are having the same, I think we both were listening to you very intently. What's going to happen with an investor who doesn't care as much about giving you feedback is they're going to get so lost in why does he seem so obsessed with the person that inspects a place versus what you're really saying is there are rules applied inconsistently based on an inspector's vibe. And there's probably reasons for that aren't malicious too. Even like it's what they believe is important in their jurisdiction, in their region, or their industry. And so these inconsistently applied rules are hard to follow, hard to comply with, and the penalties can feel like a lot. They would be compliant if they could. And these histories that we get to take from public data and operationalize allow somebody to be compliant. Again, you're like so in the middle, and in a way that I'm not surprised as a founder is happening to you, but that's something to think about is like start a little bit, from the beginning of the top of funnel of the problem.
Okay. Yeah, and like, very similar feedback. Obviously you're the expert here, right? Like you understand this compliance FDA space way more than we do. And so when I hear this, I'm like, okay, I'm hearing like, depending on like if Mike or Bob or Sheila comes, I like a company is like gonna like have different type of responses or checks. But I think the highest level way to look at this, and because for investors, like you have to always sell the story of what exactly is the business, like what's the problem, how does it make money, and how does this like grow massively. So the thing is, hey, there's like thousands of companies who are typically compliant, might slip up every now and then because nobody's perfect. But what happens is, they just are ill prepared to like have these audits done. And if they just had a 20-minute heads up, like it could end up saving them X% of like their balance sheet, right? And so then it's just like, hey, high level, you've got companies who just need a little bit more guidance for audits that are coming. We found a way to like aggregate data to say like, hey, based off of, previous things that's happened in the past, like we can kind of predict what audits are going to happen, like that, and so you can prepare, right? And then if you like, let's say, like, I mean, honestly, this is fascinating. Like, compliance is like crazy. I had no idea that this even existed. um, but then it's like, oh, wow, tell me more. And then that's when you let someone like get into the weeds with you, right? And because like at the end of the day, your pitch, and like the way I think about pitches is like it's short. You only got like a short amount of time to like capture our attention. And like you should always leave an investor like kind of like wanting to know a little bit more. And so if you tease that story of, hey, high level, this is what's happening. I can like, and I can save you money. I can make you compliant, right? And then it's like, wait, well, how? How can you? And then like from there, lead them and saying like, well, actually, what's going on, and this is our secret sauce, is we've noticed this pattern of, hey, based off of like Mike's history, he checks for A, B, and C. And so I can actually tell folks to prepare for A, B, and C. And when they do, they save, countless amounts of money. And they're willing to pay for this because if not, they're going to be at risk of having to shut down their operations.
Yeah, and the example that I think really, when you said passwords on a laptop, it like grounded so much of your story of like, oh, these also aren't compliance factors like cleaning their meat or something, right?
Right.
It's like,
yeah.
And at the beginning of the pitch, I think, again, you have to think an investor's sorting. And in my head, I was like, I don't know what compliance means yet in your case. And so like my brain was going, okay, there's a bunch of if statements that are going to, okay, here's what he might mean.
Yeah.
I'm curious, this has been, I think, hopefully centering that story. Now take us a little bit further. So you're going to build that. It sounds like you're going to make it usable by them, as in it's like a dashboard or some sort of...
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And then they get to look at it. You're going to make it probably behaviorally useful to them or have automated recommendations as to what they should do. Where does that go in long term? Let me ask this question in like the founder to founder honest way of like, okay, at some point, do either you or somebody else build an LLM version of this product that just like solves this at a high level? Is this a business or is this a feature of a larger compliance suite? Because again, it makes total sense now that you described it, but I now want to know, where does it go in 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, absolutely. So our goal for right now is we're just doing post-market. So post-market essentially means everything you do past you developing a drug and you sending it out. So trying to think of a drug that's everyone. I'm trying to think.
Ozempic?
Yeah, Ozempic. That's a good one.
Yeah.
So Ozempic's if Ozempic's facilities would get audited now, so they would use our dashboard. But when they were in their clinical trials, we aren't there yet. So our plan is to go post. Now we're doing post-market. Our plan is to go pre-market, and then after doing the entire pharmaceuticals, we want to go into maybe food, and then maybe capture everything within food, and then now we have FDA food, and then maybe even other.
I guess again, let me say this differently. What if the rules were better published? Do you become less useful?
So that's our biggest thing we're trying to do. The rules are already published. You just don't know where to find it. So what we're doing is
once you do that one, again, great answer. But then my next question becomes: once you do it once, aren't you done?
Well, in what way?
He's basically saying like, imagine you have a mess made in your kitchen, and then like you sweep, and like after you sweep, if you leave the apartment, now it's clean, right? And so like once you solve this problem of, hey, we've got all this data all over the place. Oh, sorry, we have all this data all over the place, and we've like cleaned it up for you. Like if no one makes the mess again.
Okay, yeah. So I understand that.
Yeah.
So essentially, it's not about making a mess. Like you said, it's a history. So let's say you get cited today and you get CFR code ABC. So next year you're like, I got cited for this last year ABC. I'm going to make sure I don't do ABC. But now you got D. So essentially it's a history.
If you eventually used all the histories to create a mega recommendation list and all of your clients, for some reason, were like, you get to run our business for a day, fix all the problems. And obviously there are new things that people are going to be cited for. But I guess, is it one list? And I know it's not that trivial, right? And it's complicated and you're doing this for a reason. But there's something to the fact it's a rule set that people get cited for that to me feels it's a deterministic set of rules, not a changing and probabilistic set of I might be cited for random reasons.
Okay, yes.
And so once you solve this, are you a business, but maybe not a venture-backed business? Because what else do you do for that person? Or how else do you evolve this such that people are constantly subscribing, in big contracts to you because things are changing?
Yeah. So things do change in the FDA. Sometimes they'll publish, like they're trying to publish AI guidance now. So, the use of AI in pharmaceuticals. So things do change every so often. And because of those changes, there are new things that need to be updated. So, you might get cited for things to A, but the way A is cited today is maybe different from next year and the year after that. So every year, every time someone gets cited, things always change. That's the big issue a lot of the times. And another thing is, like I said, finding it is really, really deep. And a lot of the times, another aspect that companies do is, if he gets cited today, you want to make sure that you don't have whatever he did, even though you produce not exact same drug, but similar drug. So that way, if he gets cited for A, B, you don't get cited for A, B, but you may get cited for C, D, but he did good on C, D. So
I'm just going to wrap my feedback in Lauren and I for the sake of time. I think overall, I get it. And I think the problem makes sense. The issue and the challenge from a storytelling perspective that you'll need to kind of figure out is how do you convince people it's a big enough and changing enough problem? Because even when you gave your example of, and it made sense to me, great, there's now AI guidance being given. Sure, but then is it one piece of guidance that applies to a lot of companies? Therefore, do we need, what's the name of your company?
Global Key Solutions.
Global Key Solutions to exist, again, as a very large middle thing to these every once in a while changing. And I'm sure, again, it changes per industry. But again, it's if it feels like it's 7 Twitter accounts that are changing policy and you're the middle thing between those Twitter accounts and your clients, you feel fragile. And I know you're more complicated than just being a middle thing between 7 Twitter accounts, but it sounds like, again, the way you've told this story so far, it's become clearer. So kudos to you on that. But it feels like there are 7 Twitter accounts. We're the people who read the Twitter accounts. You can't find them. We make it slightly easier. I go, all of those feel trivially solvable. What's the grander thing that's hard about this in a way that I can understand? And that's the version of your pitch that I think we'll sing.
Very similar thoughts. I guess the way I think about it, a bit more high level, is kind of like an alerting system, right? If you will, where I'm not sure if you've ever have noticed in certain cars, they've got the speed traps where it's hey, slow down, there's a cop. And even though I think for people who might be really into speeding or, something like that, where it's useful, I do need to see a little bit more of how does this evolve? What either unique data could you have access to, or what other services you could provide within compliance for something like this.
I love this analogy she found because it's the thing that, I don't know if you mean this in your head, but you're okay, so you're Waze, but Waze had to be bought by Google. Waze couldn't continue to be a big maps company just offering, speed traps and things like that. And so that analogy I think is really useful to think about. And again, in the frame of your storytelling, really good analogy. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. This sort of industry stuff where you're super outside as an expert and you get lost. How much are you pre-prepping for meetings? 30 minutes that you have in your calendar, or how much are you going cold?
On an ideal day, on an ideal day, I do a lot of prepping where I will look up the founder's background, maybe do some things about the market, have just kind of open questions going in there. Or even if I see a current solution that's similar, a lot of my questions is and we saw this with one of the earlier pitches of well, why now? I think for some of those problems that kind of drives my conversation, but really, I just try to get into hey, let me just spend time trying to really understand the problem. I mean, you can do that to a certain extent with prepping, but ultimately, I kind of let the founder guide me. And a lot of early bets are off of the team, to be completely honest. And so if I'm, picking up certain signals about just how they come off as a potential builder or potential founder, I kind of read more of that, and I let that kind of drive my, well, now let me go dig back into the market.
Believe them as that's why I tell founders assume that they've looked up nothing, and be that educator in the early version of the pitch, because even if they know something, and again, you can kind of shortcut it if you know they're an expert. It still can be so important, the difference in you making sense as a founder versus them needing to go do their homework.
For sure, and even the intentions of why building the problem.
Right.